Hey everybody, so we're going to move on to the next portion of Unit 5, which is going to be about soil. Now, I know it doesn't sound like a particularly interesting topic, but it's important for us to understand and appreciate the dynamics of soil, especially for farmers, because there's a whole science behind it, making sure it has the right pH balance, has the right nutrients and minerals, so that we can indeed have agriculture. So the first thing we're going to look at is how soil is formed, and then we're going to get into specifics of soil property. All right, so here we are with our soil notes. So one big thing that a lot of students have a misconception about is the difference between erosion and weathering, okay? So if I were to ask you, how is soil made? A lot of people say erosion, which is not correct. Erosion is the movement of soil that's already there, okay? Weathering is the process of creating soil. So the soil comes from the process of weathering, and it gets moved from place to place through erosion, all right? So we have two different types of weathering. So the first thing we need to write down is that the process begins with weathering. So I got a new little pad to write on, guys, and this does not look good. So I'm going to need a little practice, okay? So the process begins with weathering. That's what that says. Okay. So basically what happens is rocks have to be broken down. That is where soil comes from, broken down rocks. So how do rocks get broken down? And obviously it's not going to be a very quick process. It's going to take a while. So we know that rocks are exposed to air, okay, water, chemicals, that degrade rock. Okay, I promise my handwriting is going to get better, guys. I just need to practice with this new pad I'm writing on. Okay, so we have physical versus chemical weathering. So physical weathering, you can see, is the actual mechanical breakdown of rock. So this is going to be mechanical. So this is where we're typically going to see wind and water. Okay? So this rock right here is split in half, and it's easy to look at this and go, oh, that's lightning. It's actually not, because there's no burn marks on it. So what caused this great huge boulder to split in half, straight down the middle? And that's from ice, okay? So when water freezes, it expands, it grows, okay? And so it pushes that rock material apart. It separates the rock. And so when the ice melts during the summertime, it's not going to grow anymore. And then in the winter, when it freezes again, it's going to expand more. So this is through hundreds and hundreds of years of gradual freezing, thawing, refreezing. Okay. Now, the next one we have is chemical weathering. So this is where we have actual chemical reactions that are going to break down rock. Okay, chemical reactions. Now, I'm not saying that we go and pour a bottle of acid on the rock to do this. It's not what happens. There are certain types of chemical reactions that occur in nature that are slightly acidic. And if we think back to primary and secondary succession, okay, we know that the lichens that are those pioneer species, they can secrete some acidic compounds, and that will break down rocks. So this is going to be typically through lichens, okay? And that's that primary succession piece. So when we look down here, this is a super cool picture. So the question is, what created this massive hole in this rock? If you said water, you're absolutely correct. So this right here was produced by flowing water at one point, okay? Now, once the particles are created, they are moved by erosion, as I said. So once the particles are created, they are moved by erosion. So the question is, what causes erosion? What causes dirt to get moved around from place to place? So that's easy. What causes erosion? Water, wind, ice, okay? Also, living organisms, right? Living organisms. Okay, so let's look down here. All right, so this is an example in a stream. So we're looking at water flow and its impact on the movement of particles, okay? So if you look down here, this is our key that's showing us exactly what's happening, okay? Gravel-sized sediment, sand grains, clay-sized particles. So sand and clay are two specific types of soil that we'll get to in just a second. So if I were to ask you, look at the size of these particles, which ones are going to move the furthest and which ones are not going to move very far at all? Well, hopefully you would tell me that the gravel size are not going to move very far because they're the heaviest and they're the largest to move. So yes, you see them sunk at the bottom, and they stop at a certain point. Sand and clay are going to be able to move further, with clay moving the furthest because it is the smallest particle. Okay, so when water moves dirt or soil, it's moved to a new location, obviously. So we say that eroded material is placed in a new location. Okay, it's placed in a new location. This process is called deposition. And I'll explain this all over again in just a second. So this process is called deposition. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Weathering is when rocks get broken down into soil. Okay, the soil is then moved from place to place through erosion, and when it gets moved to a new location and it's at that new location, that is called deposition. Okay, that's the difference between all three. All right, so let's flip to the next page. Now, this is showing us the importance of soil. So on the AP test, you should be able to identify all of these as reasons why soil is important and why we need to protect it and conserve it. Okay, so this is all about protecting and conserving soil. And guys, if we don't have good soil, we can't grow food to eat. So it is very, very important that we conserve it. Okay, soil is also really good at filtering out a bunch of impurities. So these are the reasons. Number one, it's a medium for plant growth. Obviously, we grow our crops in this. Trees allow us to breathe oxygen. The second is it breaks down and recycles organic compounds. So think back to the food chain that we learned about last semester. You have those decomposers who return all of those nutrients and minerals back to the soil. Let's see, number 3, it is a habitat for a variety of organisms. Bacteria that are needed for decomposition. Earthworms, they aerate the soil because they dig tunnels. We need to make sure that we maintain it simply for that as well. The 4th reason, again, like I said, it filters water. It does a really good job of filtering water. And so what's fascinating is when you actually dig into a well, when you find groundwater, that water is pretty clean because it gets filtered. The water gets filtered as it goes down. Okay. So this right here is basically how long it takes for soil to be produced. So we are going to call this our timeline of production. I'm sorry, y'all, this writing is awful. Awful. Oh, that didn't even make it better. Oh, man. Okay. So it's a timeline of production. So it takes a very long time for soil to be made, as we know through that primary succession. So parent rock is where we start. Parent rock, as you can imagine, is what the soil is made from. Okay? What the soil is made from. Okay? There's different kinds of rocks, obviously, but this is not a geology course, so we're not going to go into all that. But parent rock is where we are going to get our source of soil. So the parent rock is weathered and fragments move upward. Okay, so the fragments of rock move upward from the ground. Okay, and what also happens when it moves, it's going to be deposited someplace else. So it's going to move through erosion and deposition. Okay. All right. Then we have the organic material accumulates as plants and other things die. So we're adding in our nutrients. All right. So organic material gets added. And then through time, when we have larger, more complex organisms growing, it allows greater amounts of organic material to accumulate. So it's a very slow process. All right, so in the next video, we're going to go over the last page of the soil notes, and we're going to look at the different properties of soil.